Okay, apparently it just stopped for some reason, so here we are. Home inspection. Eric put two and two together and sighed quietly. The most likely conclusion that he could draw from the two facts of his summonings and the pile of tax returns on the table was that he was about to be sent off on another tax collecting mission. Tax collecting was not something that Eric enjoyed. He was a raider and a sea wolf, a pirate and a fighter. As such, his inclination was to be more on the side of the tax evaders than the Obergel and his eager-fingered Hilfman. Unfortunately, on those previous occasions when Eric had been sent out to collect overdue or unpaid taxes, he had been too successful for his own good. Now, whenever there was the slightest doubt about the amount of tax owing from a village or a shire, Borsa automatically thought of Eric as the solution to the problem. To make matters worse, Eric's attitude and approach to the job only added to his desirability in Borsa's and Ragnar's eyes. Bored with the task and considering it embarrassing and belittling, he made sure he spent as little time on the job as possible. Not for him, the tortuous arguments and recalculations of amounts owing after all deductions had been approved and agreed. Eric opted for a more direct course, which consisted of sizing the person when investigation, ramming a double-headed broadaxe up under his chin, and threatening mayhem if all taxes, every single one of them, were not paid immediately. Eric's reputation as a fighter was well known throughout Scandinavia. To his annoyance, he was never asked to make good on his threat. Those calculations, whom he visited, invariably coughed up the due amount, and often a little extra that had never been in contention, without the slightest argument or hesitation. The two men at the table looked up as he made his way through the benches towards the end of the room. The great hall served more than one purpose. It was where Ragnar and his close followers took their meals. It was also the site of all banquets and official gatherings in Scandinavia's rough and ready social calendar, and the small open annex where Ragnar and Borsa were currently studying tax returns was also Ragnar's office. It wasn't particularly private, since any member of their inner or outer council of Giles had access to the hall at any time of day. But then, Ragnar wasn't the sort to need privacy. He ruled openly and made all his policy statements to the world at large. Ah, Eric, you're here, said Borsa, and Eric thought, not for the first time, that the Helfman had a habit of stating the bleeding obvious. Who was it at this time? He asked in a resigned voice. He knew there was no use trying to argue his way out of assignment, so he might as well just get it over with. With luck, it would be one of the small towns down the coast, and at least he might have a chance to work up his crew and wolfship at the same time. Mr. O, the Obergel told him, and Eric's hopes of salvaging something useful from this assignment faded to nothing. Mr. O lay far inland to the east. It was a small settlement on the far side of the mountain range that formed the rugged spine of Scandinavia and was accessible only by going over the mountains themselves or through one of the half a dozen tortuous passes that wound their way through. Why do I keep getting caught up on torturers? That's so weird. At best, it meant an uncomfortable journey there and back by pony, a method of transport that Eric loathed. As he thought of the mountain range that reared above Helsholm, he had a quick memory of the two Ireland slaves he had helped escape several months ago. He wondered what had become of them, whether they had made it to the small hunting cabin high in the mountains, and whether they had survived the last months of winter. He realized abruptly that Borsa and Ragnar were both waiting for his reaction. Mr. O, he repeated. Ragnar nodded impatiently. Their quarterly payment is overdue. I want you to go and shake them up, the Obergel said. Eric noticed that Ragnar couldn't quite hide the avaricious gleam that came into his eyes whenever he talked about tax and payments. Eric couldn't help giving vent to an exasperated sigh. They can't be overdue by more than a week or so, he temporized, but Ragnar was not to be swayed and shook his head violently. 10 days, he snapped, and it's not the first time. I've warned them before, haven't I, Borsa? He said, turning to the Huffman, who nodded. The jail at Site O is Sten H, Borsa said, as if that were explanation enough. Eric stared blankly at him. He should be called Sten that, he elaborated with heavy sarcasm. The tax payments have stuck to his fingers before this, and even when they're paid in full, he always makes us wait long past overdue date. It's time we taught him a lesson. Eric smiled with some irony at the small, sparsely muscled Healthman. Borsa could be an extremely threatening figure, he thought, when someone else was available to carry out the threats. You mean it's time I taught him a lesson, he suggested, but Borsa didn't notice the sarcasm in his voice. Exactly, he said with some satisfaction. Ragnar, however, was a little more perceptive. It's my money, after all, Eric, he said, and there was a note in his voice that was almost petulant. Eric met his gaze steadily. For the first time, he realized that Ragnar was growing old. The once flaming red hair was duller and turning grey. It came as a surprise to Eric. He certainly didn't feel that he was growing older, yet Ragnar didn't have too many years on him. He couldn't notice other changes in the Oberjowl now that he had become aware of the fact. The hair was greying, the jowls were heavier, and the waistline thickening. He wondered if he was changing too, but then dismissed the notion. He had marked no dramatic changes in his own face, and he studied it each morning in his burnished metal mirror. He decided it must be due to the pressure of being Oberjowl. It's been a severe winter, he shrugged. Perhaps the passes are still blocked. There was a lot of late snow. He moved to the large-scale map of Scandinavia that was displayed on the wall behind Ragnar's table.